It was a warm afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of day where the city buzzed with energy. Crowds gathered outside the historic Chinese theater, hoping for a glimpse of their favorite celebrities at a film premiere. Among the sea of fans was a young girl named Sophie, clutching a small handmade bracelet in her tiny hands. Sophie was just 9 years old, with bright blue eyes and an infectious smile. She had come to see her hero, Johnny Depp, who had inspired her through his many roles. Sophie and her mother, Karen, had driven for hours to be there. They didn't have much, but Sophie's excitement about seeing Johnny Depp had been enough for Karen to save up for the trip. Sophie had spent weeks creating a friendship bracelet in her favorite colors, blue and gold, hoping to give it to the actor as a token of her admiration. The bracelet was simple but heartfelt, each knot tied with care. The crowd roared as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Johnny Depp, dressed in his signature bohemian style, a wide-brimmed hat, layered scarves, and his trademark sunglasses. He waved to the crowd, his warm smile lighting up the atmosphere. Fans screamed his name, holding out posters, hats, and memorabilia for him to sign. Sophie stood on her tiptoes, clutching the bracelet tightly. Her heart raced as Johnny moved closer, greeting fans and signing autographs. When he finally reached her, she froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the presence of her idol. But Johnny's gentle smile and kind eyes put her at ease. "Hi there," Johnny said, crouching slightly to meet her gaze. "What's your name?" "Sophie," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise. "It's nice to meet you, Sophie," Johnny replied. "What's that you've got there?" Gathering her courage, Sophie held out the bracelet. "I made this for you," she said. "It's not much, but I wanted to thank you. You make me happy when I watch your movies." Johnny's expression softened as he took the bracelet from her hands. He examined it closely, appreciating the effort and care that had gone into it. "This is beautiful," he said sincerely. "Thank you, Sophie. I'll treasure it." He slipped the bracelet onto his wrist, holding it up for the cameras to see. The crowd cheered, and Sophie's smile grew so wide it seemed to light up the entire block. Karen watched from a few feet away, tears welling in her eyes at the sight of her daughter's dream coming true. Johnny didn't stop there. He signed Sophie's notebook and even posed for a photo with her. Before moving on to the next fan, he leaned in and said, "Thank you for this. You've made my day." As Johnny continued to greet fans, one of his assistants noticed Sophie still lingering by the barricade, her eyes following him with a mix of awe and gratitude. The assistant leaned down and whispered to her, "Why don't you and your mom stick around for a bit? Johnny might have a little extra time to chat after the crowd thins out." Sophie's face lit up and she nodded eagerly. Karen, overhearing the offer, hesitated at first. "We don't want to impose," she said. "Trust me," the assistant replied with a smile. "He'd love it." When the majority of the crowd had dispersed, Johnny walked back towards Sophie and Karen. "Hey, Sophie," he said warmly. "Still here? I'm glad. Let's sit for a bit." He gestured to a small seating area set up near the theater entrance. Sophie, clutching her mom's hand, followed him nervously. For the next 15 minutes, Johnny asked Sophie about her favorite movies, her hobbies, and what she wanted to be when she grew up. Sophie's shyness melted away as she told him about her dream of becoming an artist. "I love drawing," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Sometimes I draw characters from your movies, like Captain Jack Sparrow." Johnny chuckled. "Captain Jack, huh? I'd love to see those drawings someday." Karen chimed in. "She's actually really talented. She's been drawing since she could hold a pencil." Johnny's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, Sophie, art is one of the most powerful ways to tell a story. Never stop drawing, okay? And if you ever need inspiration, just remember moments like this." Sophie nodded solemnly, as if she were receiving advice from a wise old friend. "I promise," she said. Before parting ways, Johnny reached into his bag and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. "Here," he said, handing it to Sophie. "This is for your drawings. Fill it up with your art, and maybe one day we'll work on something together." Sophie's jaw dropped. "Really? Really?" Johnny confirmed. "But only if you promise to keep that big heart of yours. That's what makes your art special." Karen's heart swelled with emotion as she watched her daughter hug Johnny tightly. She couldn't believe how one small act of kindness had turned into a life-changing moment for Sophie. The next morning, Sophie's photo with Johnny Depp Her bracelet, prominently displayed on his wrist, began circulating on social media. Fans were touched by the story, praising Sophie's gesture and Johnny's heartfelt response. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, Karen received an unexpected phone call. "Hi, this is Sarah Collins from Johnny Depp's team," the voice on the other end said. "Johnny was so moved by Sophie's kindness that he'd like to invite you both to the set of his upcoming movie. Would that be all right?" Karen could hardly believe her ears. "Are you serious?" she stammered. "Absolutely," Sarah replied. "He'd like to personally thank Sophie for the bracelet. All expenses will be covered." When Karen shared the news with Sophie, the little girl squealed with joy. A week later, they found themselves on a private flight to the movie set, located in a picturesque coastal town. Sophie could hardly contain her excitement as they arrived, her eyes wide with wonder at the bustling activity of cameras, crew members, and elaborate sets. Johnny greeted them warmly, wrapping Sophie in a hug. "Welcome to the set," he said. "I'm so glad you could make it." He gave them a personal tour, introducing Sophie to the cast and crew. He even let her sit in his director's chair and try on one of his iconic hats. But the biggest surprise came later that afternoon. As they stood by one of the sets, Johnny pulled Karen aside. "I've been thinking a lot about Sophie," he said. "She has such a kind heart, and I want to do something special for her. Would you mind if I set up a scholarship fund for her future? I'd like to make sure she has every opportunity to follow her dreams." Karen was speechless, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to thank you," she managed to say. "You don't have to thank me," Johnny replied. "Sophie's already given me more than I could ever repay." But Johnny wasn't done yet. That evening, as the sun set over the ocean, he gathered the cast and crew for a special announcement. "Today, I've had the pleasure of spending time with one of my biggest inspirations," he said, gesturing to Sophie. "This young lady reminded me of the importance of kindness and the power of small gestures. And to thank her, I've decided to name a character in this movie after her." The crowd erupted in applause as Sophie's cheeks turned bright red. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her name would forever be a part of Johnny Depp's legacy. When the movie was released months later, Sophie's story gained even more attention. Fans around the world were moved by the tale of a little girl whose small act of kindness had inspired a Hollywood legend. Interviews, news articles, and social media posts celebrated the bond between Sophie and Johnny, turning her into a local celebrity in her own right. Years later, Sophie would look back on that day as the moment her life changed forever. The scholarship fund allowed her to pursue her passion for art, eventually leading to a successful career as an illustrator. And every time she saw the bracelet on Johnny's wrist in old photos, she was reminded of the incredible power of kindness and the magic of believing in dreams. If you had the chance to meet a celebrity, who would you want it to be? Let us know in the comments down below.